Hello, and welcome to this month's Carterette series webinars hosted by the Georgia Library Association. I'm Tessa Minshew at Georgia Perimeter College, and my fellow planning team members are Sarah Steiner and Karen Byers. We're really excited to be able to highlight trends in innovation and best practices in Georgia's academic, public, special, and school libraries. While the focus is on highlighting Georgia speakers and programs, these webinars are open to anyone, anywhere, so please feel free to bring a friend. We're also on Facebook, so look us up and like our page so you can keep up with us for details on future webinars. The Carterette series webinars are sponsored by the Professional and Continuing Education Interest Group of the Georgia Library Association. So if you live in Georgia but you aren't a member of GLA, we strongly encourage you to join. Your membership shows much appreciated support for these webinars and for the Georgia Library community as a whole. Now, before I introduce you to Emily, our first speaker, I'd like to tell you a couple little technical things. For those of you who are tweeting, and we encourage you to do that, the hashtag is Carterette. And remember, please, that moderators can see your chats in Illuminate, even if they're sent privately. So, only say lovely things about us when you're sending private chats. If at any point you lose audio, just log out and log back in again, and that ought to fix it. And the attendance certificates are being done online, and we'll show you that URL later on in the session, and it'll also be emailed out later on today. Great, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm very excited to introduce you to Emily Almond today. She started in news but landed in libraries by way of more news software development, knowledge management, the omnipresent web, and full-on project management, both the library kind and the private sector brand. She's currently the Director of IT for the Georgia Public Library Service, and her website is emilyalmond.wordpress.com. So take it away, Emily.
Hello, everyone. Oh my God, I'm having a huge echo. One sec, technical issues. How's that? Still echoey? Of course, I'm the Director of IT. One sec. Okay, how's that? How's that? Is that still echoing? And how's that? I think that did it. Excellent. If in doubt, just press a lot of buttons, right? That's the key to desktop support. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad that finally worked. Notice the shark fin behind me. That's why I'm so happy in the picture. Still sounds like I'm in a tunnel. Okay. I'll just keep chatting about my picture at the beach until it works. How's that? Of course, we had this all figured out at the beginning. I've changed nothing, and now I'm getting not great feedback. Okay, great. Sounds fine to me. Excellent. We're going to move on. Sarah and Tessa so graciously introduced me. It was great in the test. It was. I didn't change a thing. Anyway, we'll move on. Basically, I learned project management on the job. I was lucky enough to work in a lot of different libraries, a lot of different types of organizations. So I've been immersed in project management for 8 to 10 years now. And I really feel like I've been able to kind of pick and choose what's working for libraries right now in the present and what we can happily leave behind. That's my history. We just went over it, so we'll skip it. This is what's to come in the presentation. Just wanted to let you know I'm going to go over project management proper, air quotes, and the methodology around it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. And then we're going to go to a library project that I just made up and kind of apply what we've been talking about. And in between, we'll have time for questions. So I wanted to start with the very basics, because I run into a lot of folks who want me to do a project, but I'm not sure they know what a project is. And so I have to find out gently if they do understand, and it's very valuable to get this out in the beginning, that a project is temporary, right? Oh, I know I've been given lots and lots of work that says, take on this project, take on that project. But what they really mean is take on more work that you're going to own until the end of your position at the organization. And so I have found that it's really valuable to remind the powers that be that a project is temporary. It's about a result. It's about a process being created, a product being created. Now, the result of the project may end up being absorbed by the organization as part of maintenance, organizational processes, etc., but it's not necessarily by me or the project manager. It's going to be something ideally that the project team is going to hand off, and then the project team is going to disperse. So that's critical for whomever wants to do whatever endeavor to understand. Project management, then, is the process around beginning and ending that temporary endeavor, the project. Critical to understand that. And now that you do, you can tell your boss every time they ask. So the Project Management Institute has been around a long time. And it's really, the website is really valuable. You don't have to join. It's just got a ton of resources on the website, and I have URLs at the end. And I'm sure you've seen the initials PMP. I am not one, and so caveat, everything I'm saying is unprofessional. But in order to get Project Management Professional Certificate, you have to amass a certain number of hours and pass this horrible test, and it's a big deal, and then you get paid a lot of money. So, Rita Mulcahy is someone who's I like a lot. I like a lot of her resources, and I really respect her. And her materials around project management are what the PMP, the Project Management Professional Certificate, is based on. So she's a good place to start, and we're going to be going along with her methodology. Another person I wanted to introduce, though, is Mary Poppendiek, because I do mostly software development project management. She's made a name in Agile project management. She's wonderful, and she's got a great site, great listserv, really interesting people. So I just wanted to point her out. If you're in the software side of things, she's a wonderful person to follow. Okay, let's get down to it. Now, these are all the steps you want to take in a proper project. It's nothing really, what is it, I think it's 60-something steps that you're supposed to take. This is the proper way. This is Rita's way. And this is you have to know everything about every little box to do the Project Management Professional Certificate. And I've been through several projects where we do it all. We march through every piece of this. And it's long and it's arduous. And the advantage to me being put through that gauntlet was that I was able to very subjectively pick and choose the pieces of each process that I thought really applied, especially to library projects. And so I kind of made myself this slide. So these are the elements we're going to focus on in this presentation as Emily's way, the improper way to get through a library project. But you know what? At least you're doing something. At least you're applying some project management to an otherwise unstructured process. It protects you, it protects your team, it protects your resources. Chances are the stakeholders or whomever initiated the project is going to be impressed that you thought it through and is going to be happier in the end because you delivered. This project management kind of guarantees that you will deliver. And you know, that's nothing to take for granted. Okay, so this is just a list of what we see here. So, notice, I'm going to attempt to draw. Notice that each of these, whoops. Hold on. Here we go. Okay. Notice that each of these are processes: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. So that's what this is. Notice, if you would, that most of the work goes into the project before it officially starts. Notice that under executing, monitoring, and controlling, that's where the work of the project is visible. That's where you start moving the books or writing the code or whatever your project is. And so if we go back to this chart, initiating and planning is where most of the work of the project is done. And it's not very visible, but what it does is save you so much time, effort, headache, misunderstanding, miscommunication, and upset on the back end. How many of you, and my guess is that you're going to raise your, all of you are going to raise your hands, have been in a project and you all think you're going in the same direction, and you all think you're working on the same thing, and you get to the point where you're really putting nose to the grindstone, and all of a sudden it falls apart. Because half of you thought you were building a blue box, and half of you thought you were building a red circle. And you didn't know in the beginning that you were pointing in different directions. And so, by going through the steps, which are arduous and labor-intensive and not that fun, of initiating and planning, you're going to be able to identify the potholes, the problems, the misunderstandings ahead of time. And in my experience, librarians are really good at this. We're really good at saying, okay, if we adopt this new ILS and we do it this way and we migrate our data this way, then you know what's going to happen 5 years ago? 5 years from now, rather? Well, it's all going to fall apart because X, Y, Z. Librarians are really good at mentally pushing that first domino and watching the dominoes fall. We can predict what's going to happen. And so I think we're really well suited for project management. And I don't think we need to make as much of a case as we would in different organizations to go ahead and take your time and do each of these steps. So we're going to go through these really quickly and just give you an overview of what the steps are, and then we're going to take it to the library and show you how it might be done. Okay, this is something that was new to me when I took on project management, and I thought, wow, that would have saved me how much headache in the past had I known about this step. Identifying your stakeholders. Someone, your boss, my boss comes to me and says, you know what I want to do? I want to reprogram, rewrite the interface for the OPAC because X, Y, Z. So instead of saying, okay, that's crazy, you say to your boss, okay, why? Not why, but sure. Why? Who's going to be affected by this? And then again, where is this coming from? Is this coming from you? Is this coming from feedback you've gotten from undergraduates or public library patrons? Who's going to be affected by this change, should this change happen? And who will affect the change? So these are questions to ask my boss as we're just hashing it out, which leads to the business need. So that was the who, and then the business need is the why. And I've been on so many projects where the business need is just glossed over with one statement, because I want it, right? Well, my boss wants it, I have to do it, and that's business need enough. Well, no, it's really not, because I'm the project manager and I have to own this thing. And so I really have to understand why is it being done. So if my boss really wants this OPAC rewrite done, then I have to understand why. And I have to understand the need, because it will be more efficient, leading to less downtime, leading to more discovery of materials. I need something that justifies my project. And then the project objectives. What specific product or outcome is wanted? And this is where we start talking about scope, and we're going to talk about scope in a second. This is where we start thinking about, okay, you say you want the OPAC rewritten. Okay, so the outcome would be a totally different discovery layer for the library, or an OPAC that is now green instead of red, or an OPAC that features ebooks. You start thinking about what is it that is really being asked. And I think this is a very difficult thing to do, especially when you're asking folks who aren't used to being asked questions like this. Sometimes I've come across people who think of it as they get into defensive mode. And that's really not what I'm asking. I'm not trying to poke holes in it. I'm trying to understand what it is that you're asking. So determining those objectives helps you shape that scope. So the scope is, again, how you define your project. Where does the project end and where does it begin? Again, is it changing the buttons from red to green, or is it changing the entire navigation? I need to know what it is, and so importantly, what it's not. This is not a database cleanup. This is not a restructuring of the tables. This is a navigation project and with this objective. And this is where I'll stop and talk about the triangle. We're going to talk a lot about the triangle. The triangle is going to follow us throughout the presentation because it is so important. If we decide, okay, we understand where the project begins and where it ends, we pretty much get what we want to do here. If we know that, we should be able to roughly estimate how much time and how many resources, how much money. People is money. So we've identified our stakeholders, so we know who needs to be on the project and who's going to be affected. We understand the business need. We understand what it is and what it's not. With that information, we should be able to say, it's going to take 6 months, roughly, and we'll get into how to do that in a second. And it's going to take this many people and this much money. And we're going to go over risk management in a second, but I want to forward to this and say if you apply nothing else, if you take away nothing else from this webinar, if you want to log off right after this slide, just kidding. Remember the triple constraint, the sacred triangle. The key here is all sides must remain equilateral. Scope, where does it begin and where does it end? Now, if the scope increases, time has to increase, cost has to increase. Everything has to be adjusted to match. Does? Yes, exactly. It's the Bermuda Triangle. You can get lost in this triangle if you're not careful. So what you want to do is say, someone comes to you and says, yeah, I want to add this. I want to add a discovery layer to the new OPAC. Okay. You don't say no, or I want to kill you, or you can internally. But you'll say, okay. Then we need to reapproach the scope and say how much more time and how much more money. Because you cannot increase one without affecting the other two sides. Inversely, someone says, okay, we don't have as much money as we thought. You say, okay. But you say, okay. Then that's going to affect how much time and probably the outcome of the project. So let's reapproach and say if there's less money, then we're going to produce less of a product or a different product, and it's going to take more or less time. So you have to change your triangle. You're going to let everyone pause and take in the triangle. The triangle is sacred. Okay, going back to risk management. And risk management goes hand in hand with these processes, because what you're trying to do when you're estimating time and cost is you try to look ahead and say, what are the risks? And eliminate as many threats as you possibly can. And we're going to go over how to do that in just a minute. But the main thing is, one of the easiest things to do is just take out a calendar. One time, I scheduled an upgrade the first week of a summer reading program. And in public libraries, that's a disaster. But I didn't know what summer reading was, because I'd come from a corporate library. And so when I polled everyone and said, what's a good week to do this huge, labor-intensive upgrade that's going to shut down everyone's service? And, you know, I was like, oh, that looks good. Good window. Okay. It was very convenient for me. So I scheduled it. And the morning of, I get a call. You did this the day summer reading starts. And I'm like, what's summer reading? So anyway, that was a very easy threat to eliminate by taking out a calendar and polling the right people. Again, as much project management experience as I had, I didn't take into consideration the huge group of stakeholders. So, lesson learned. So we'll go over risk management more in detail in just a moment. Again, the sacred triangle. Now, this is where the work, quote unquote, starts. This is where the visible work begins. This is where you start coding, moving the books, whatever it is that you're doing. And the key to all of that work that you did before is that you make very few changes while you're doing the work. And I put that quote in there, and you know what? It's true. Changes made during the project execution can cost up to 100 times more and more. I've seen it. I've been in that. And, you know, libraries have plenty of money, so we shouldn't have to worry about that. But if there are changes during the project, use your triangle. As Cliff said, be the triangle. Be a walking triangle, triple constraint. So if someone comes to you with a change, be the triangle and say, well, if you want to change that, then the scope creeps. And then the other two sides of the triangle creep. And so, sure, we could do it. But these are the consequences. Finally, and this is crucial, it seems kind of throwaway, but it's crucial. Because the project begins and ends, because it's a temporary endeavor, you hand it off. I have had so many projects before I learned this that I ended the project and just kept it, kept the product, took ownership over it, felt ownership over it. It's like being a foster parent. I just wouldn't adopt the baby out. Well, it's very important to hand it over. Tie up all the loose ends, make sure it's done. Have you met expectations? Make sure everybody knows not a report out, a shout out, a commercial. Make sure everyone knows. And definitely, and this is actually part of the certification test, believe it or not, throw a party to celebrate your project success. The reason it's part of certification is because so many people have been on so many projects, and you know, let's be realistic, they're giving of their time and effort in a volunteer type way. It's usually not part of their normal job. And then when it's done, it's just done. It just kind of goes out with a whisper, not a bang. And everybody's like, meh, it's done, I guess. And then everybody goes back to their normal jobs. And they're not terribly motivated to join another project. So one of the ways, it's simple, it works, to make sure that people understand that we appreciate what they did, we want them to be on another project, you have something to show for your work, is throw a party. Take the time to celebrate what you've just done. So I'm going to go back through these slides. It's very irritating. I'm going to do it. Go back here. So we've just gone over everything here. Notice we spent most of our time in initiating and planning. And then sometime, and this is true of a lot of projects, you'll see the timeline. It's 6 months of initiating and planning, 3 months of executing, and a month to close. It's pretty typical, but it makes you look awesome, because in 3 months' time, you got this awesome thing done. Wow. Very important to remember that the weight is on the front for a reason. Okay. We just went over a lot. So I'm going to stop for questions before we take it to the library. There's a question on the chat. Is it legitimate to include party costs in planning? It is. It's really legitimate. You put it in your budget line. I've included party planning. I've included gifts for the people who've worked on the project, food for times when there's crunch time. Really important to take care of the people on your project. Does the triangle always have to be equilateral? It does, because it's a way to illustrate visually. I mean, this is not like a scientific tool. It's a visual communication tool. To illustrate visually, if you cut my cost, scope gets cut. If you cut my resources, scope gets cut. If you tell me to get it done in half the time, you get half the product. It's a way to show the impact of what you're being asked to either tack on or take off the project. Cliff, you know, Cliff is making a great point in the chat. Write it down, write it down. So much easier to have folks talk about a planning document than just, definitely. The key to the planning meetings and everything we're talking about, initiating and planning, and if you look at resources about project management, initiating and planning are not about getting together and talking about what you want. It's about there's so much document management that goes into it. There's a scope definition, a scope statement, a timeline, a risk management matrix, a budget, and all of this goes into the project portfolio. And then everyone signs off on these documents. It's very formalized, it's very official. You can't just, nothing that's said is a contract. Unless it's on paper, that's not what you're doing. And meeting recaps. Ashley is talking about meeting recaps. What I've done in my projects, and again, it's labor intensive. Project management is labor intensive. I've gone around, we have weekly project meetings. I've gone around to every person on the project and talked to them individually. Make sure they understand where we are from last time, where we're going this time. Have the meeting. Right after the meeting, send recaps of everything we just talked about and the next steps. The next week, have you followed up with your next steps? Do you understand where we are, where we're going? It starts again. It's very labor intensive, especially in the beginning. But if it's all documented, then no one has an excuse to say, I didn't understand. Yeah, Cliff, I'm talking about project requirement document. Exactly. Everyone has to sign off every step of the way. There's a document management portfolio of forms on Readable Casey's site, and there are forms that go with every block that I highlighted in yellow on the process chart. Project management pushover. Tessa, let me respond to that, because that's a really good point. A lot of this process is here. The document management, the project management process is here so that you don't have to constantly be the bad guy, so that you don't have to be the angry parent. It's there, so you put it out in the very beginning and you say, this is the framework within which we're going to work. Does everyone agree that we need to take these steps to get from A to B? Awesome. Okay. Everyone then just takes responsibility. It's not this simple, but it's better than just trying to push people. Everyone takes responsibility, understands where you're going, through the document management process, through the project management process, and it does engender a sense of everyone taking responsibility for their piece. Therefore, I'm not the mean mommy walking around saying, why haven't you done your la-la-la? I don't have to do that now. I can say, here are the recaps of the meeting. These were the to-dos. Everyone did their to-do except for Tessa. And just let peer pressure take over. Because everybody will look at Tessa and say, okay, well, that just increased our timeline for about 2 weeks. And now, ... And so it really takes the pressure off the project manager to say, to be the bad guy. Because you're really falling back on the structure. Casey says, I often feel like I'm overthinking things. You know what, Casey? Absolutely. And when I was first starting to learn like proper project management, I just thought they were nuts. Like, how can there be 68 steps to this? It's not that complicated. And that's why I kind of pulled out the steps that I thought were really important for libraries, because we don't have, on a general rule, multi-million-dollar 3-year projects where we have get her done. Libraries are very get her done. And so the things that help that I pulled out of this process, and that if you want to revisit, you may say, I like that, or this works well for me. They're about protecting you as a project manager to help you identify risks, identify loopholes, get it done. Karen's comment. Steve, yeah, it will. It does. So Karen is talking about someone who loves to think of and talk about ideas, but didn't want to pin down what we're going to do because that wasn't as fun. I found that to be very true. I've worked in public, academic, and private libraries, and I cannot tell you, and I know that you in academia will kind of understand this, how much we would sit around and talk about, wouldn't it be great if, and wouldn't it be awesome if, and they were very fun conversations. And I would get frustrated because I'm very much a boots on the ground type person, because I would say, okay, so what are we doing, and how are we going to get there, and should we start? And so again, this process, this structure helps you kind of refocus that conversation and say, now, what is the scope? Because, yeah, I'd love to, build a whole new ILS, but are we not just talking about the navigation on this page? Doug's question. Yeah, definitely. There is I hope everybody can read Doug's question. It's about a flowchart of all your steps. For every project, you should have some sort of content management. You don't have to have a content management system, blah, 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 unless you have one. But some sort of content management folder that only the project manager can edit. That way, you manage all of your documents and all the versions of the documents. But that way, everybody has a common place where you go, and you know that if you're pulling up the timeline, or the scope statement, or the budget, you're seeing the most current version of that document, and everybody knows where you're at. Cliff, that's a great question. I've worked in places where, it's really super project management culture, and then places that really balk at this kind of formality. And I'm in one now. They didn't balk at the kind of formality in the structure, but we're unfamiliar with it. I would say most of the places I've worked have been unfamiliar with project management as a proper process. That there really are steps that you need to take around it, just like any other. I've lost my train of thought. Wait a minute. I don't want to say it's like law or medicine, but project managers take it that seriously. There are things you do, period, that's it. And so sometimes what I've done is take a project and say, okay, now I'm going to apply these project management principles to this process. And if you would just trust me and come along with me on the one thing, it's usually a low-risk project. It's something that is not as impactful to the organization, just to demonstrate that it was easier, smoother, usually, really, inevitably, a better result with project management. And, try and pull them along that way by demonstrating that they can trust me. So, great questions. Let's get going, because I do want to get to the library part of this thing. So here we go. So your boss comes up to you and says, hey, the library director on the Hill color-coded their young adult collection, and they're getting all kinds of attention, so I want to do it. Okay, I'll see you later. I'm going on vacation. So that's not too far off, I'm guessing, from some requests that folks have gotten. So what do? Well, you're like, okay. Your bonus today is your project logo, because it's very important to be able to sell the project from the beginning. So you fall back on your structure that you know, and you say, okay, boss, let me go get my little process chart, and we'll talk. So you sit down with the person who has this great idea, which it might be a great idea. It's awfully pretty. And you ask them. You do your little interview. Who's going to be affected by the project? Well, it's only color-coding young adult books. But you know what? Everybody. Circulation, stacks, systems. Wow, a lot. And then who has influence over this project? Is the library board okay with us spending money to do this? Library director wants this? Okay. And then you're asking yourself, so I hear that you want it, and I hear that unofficially, one of the justifications is to make you happy. I'm not going to put that down in the scope statement, but we know it's true. So what else? How are you going to justify this? What would you write in the newspaper article when we debut this new project? And you start getting and thinking. And often in other organizations that I've worked at, we have what we call murder boards. And we would go before a board of people, and they would ask us these two questions. And if we didn't answer them to their level of satisfaction, they'd murder the project. Well, 90% of the projects never got past these two questions. But it was good. It was good to weed it out. You don't spend money on the projects that cannot survive. And so often, asking these questions is totally worth it. And they'll say, I didn't think of that. I don't think we should do it. And you're like, okay, we're off the hook. But we're in the practice now of asking these questions. But say your boss says, because I think it's a great idea and blah, 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 and they give you good answers to these. Okay. Well, you move on then. So what exactly are we talking about here? How many floors? Fiction? Non-fiction? What are you talking about? I mean, really, do you want to just young adult? Okay, and then what's the end result of the project? What are you going to say? In the newspaper article, to the patrons, is you cut the ribbon. This should be your little mission statement. And so if the director says, this will do X, Y, and Z for our library, and we're going to attract and we're going to blah, 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 And you say, okay. And you take this on as your mission for your project. So when you start recruiting people for the project, who's going to work on the project, they should know this. That the reason they're doing this is new people will see the library in a whole new way. And they should carry that with them. All right, so we got through the first 3 steps in the gauntlet. Oh, the sacred triangle. Well, this is where you sit with your director or your stakeholder, whomever is kind of sponsoring the project, and you sit with your team, and you say to yourself, this is a project, so it begins and it ends, right? Where does it begin? Where does it end? Is it 4th floor only? Young adult collection only, is that right? Or is time the driver? It's whatever we can get done by April. So, red and blue only. Or you have, $500. Do what you can. You have to understand what the driver is. You have to understand which side of the triangle is going to drive the other 2 sides. So, when you start asking those questions, you start asking more specific questions. And this is where you can get bogged down in planning, yes, and it's worth it. It's worth it to take the time. Is there a firm deadline? I've worked on so many projects where, that's kind of mushy, and then it just goes on for 3 years. It's awful. But if you do set a firm deadline, is that realistic? Well, think it through. Figure it out. You can't really know the answer to that until you understand how many resources and how much money you have. So you're constantly adjusting your triangle until you think it matches. So once you think that you understand what you're doing, where it begins and ends, how much money it's going to take, including people, and how long it's going to take, then you have your sacred triangle and you can move on. You're still in planning, however. No, you never get away from planning. Risk management. You got your triangle, you think everything's set, all is well, you have a timeline, moving along, and then someone says, well, what about? You're like, oh yeah, that changes everything. One of the ways to keep from the whatabouts sneaking up on you is to go ahead and get everybody in the room like they hate doing and doing a little brainstorming about risk management. There are so many tools for risk management. We're going to go over one very quickly. The probability impact matrix is the most straightforward, most subjective, non-scientific risk management tool out there, in my opinion. There are other much more in-depth tools, some of which I'm listing here. We won't go over them, but tons of resources. So, we're in a library. We're color-coding the collection of young adult books. Get everybody together and poll them. That's it. So, what's the likelihood this is going to happen? And then what's the impact? Some things may be terribly likely, but the impact is going to be kind of low. Some things are very impactful, but not likely. So something that would be very impactful, but not likely, would be a hurricane if you live in Kansas. Yes, it would level the library. Not very likely. Really can't take it into consideration. However, something that's highly likely is if you organize things by color, the Dewey Decimal System is not going to be a reliable way to find the book. Well, how impactful is it? Well, kind of like a lot. So you put that in the upper left-hand corner, and then you color-code it. Anything that's higher, medium likely, with a higher, medium impact, you need to look at that. You need to mitigate and strategize to either eliminate or mitigate those risks. And then you go back to your timeline and you say, oh, wait a minute, we need to do X, Y, and Z before we even start sorting. And that increases the time, which actually increases the scope of the project. Triangle comes through again. So, risk management is your last check. Unofficially, not according to the proper way, but in my experience, it's your last check before you start doing. Okay. I'm flipping papers because I have notes and you can't see me do it. Here we go. Okay, we're going to start doing. Now, everybody's rolling along. They're sorting the books red and yellow, and we've figured out all the problems that might come to fruition. And lo and behold, we forgot something. Or, lo and behold, the director comes and says, oh no, wait, I wanted the books to be in order by size as well as color. I didn't really say that before because I didn't think of it. But you're only halfway through, you can fix it, right? Well, yes, we can fix it. And you go back to your triangle, don't you? And you say, it's going to take this much more time and this much more money because these many people need to be involved, and you just increased our scope because now it's not color, it's also size. So, sure, we can do it, but you're thinking to yourself, how could this have been avoided? Well, just by asking questions. A lot of times it can't be, but just by asking questions. Director, are you sure that's what you want? Are you sure that's all you want? And just through experience, after years of doing projects, you learn to ask questions like, what about size? You know. And so sometimes it couldn't have been avoided. And again, this is about scope creep. I'm just trying to hammer home the idea. Protect your triangle. So someone comes along and you've been like super successful, right? Everybody loves you because your project went just seamlessly. Now it's so easy for you. Now do the 5th floor looks great. Now do the 6th. Young adult looks great. Now do science fiction. Sure. Okay. No problem. You don't say, no, God, no. I just want to die. You say, okay. It'll take this much more time. This much more money. Change happens during the project. I just keep hammering this home because I cannot stress it enough. You want the blue to go next to the yellow, you're doing it wrong. You're like, okay, it'll take this much more time and this much more money, but sure, aye, Captain, we can do that. And it really helps avoid the power struggles, to an extent, this is not a fix-all. It helps avoid those horrible moments when I've taken responsibility for things I couldn't control and someone's just kept piling on. The triangle protects you, you protect your triangle. Finally, you're done with young adult, it's sorted by color, everything in the ILS is fixed. It's awesome, it's pretty, you're taking pictures. And this is the part that librarians are just terrible at, in my experience. That's why we've got 2 slides on prove you were successful. Prove you were successful. Take pictures, advertise, tell people what you did. Take a minute and make your team look really good. You do that, they're going to be much more willing to work with you in the future. And say, look at me, look at us, look at what we did. It's important. Get that pizza, throw that party. Okay, so we just went through the color-coded project. Isn't that pretty? Look, awesome. Look how awesome we are. And now we've officially closed. We've closed the file folder. We put it in the file cabinet. We're so excited. Shoo! We take all of our project management resources and we put them back on the bookshelf, never to look at them again. But just in case you need to, here are some good resources. And this book is really important because a lot of us, myself included, got into project management by just being thrown in and drowning. And so this book is by Rita Mulcahy. It's wonderful. And it really helps go through some of the stuff that we talked about today in a very methodical way, but so that you can apply it right away. And that's my contact info. And now I'm done and ready for questions as long as we have time. Agile, okay, they're asking, is Agile Development a different take on this? Please include all of these steps. Agile Development is specific to certain industries. It started with Toyota. The Toyota Way is Agile Development. It's a fascinating book if you're into it. But Agile Development has been adopted by software because Agile Development is not about eliminating some of these steps, but it's about iterative steps. It's about taking a lot of what we talked about today and doing it all in tiny cycles. So you would do everything we did today, up to an extent, in a week cycle or 2-week cycle, and then reapproach. And so Agile is being very flexible and very quick about what you're doing. And so you've got versions, 1.0, 1.1, 1.2. And it works so much better with software because software is not built like a car, or a car is a bad example, a building. Software needs to be built from beginning to end, reviewed, oh, this isn't working, that needs to be tweaked, and then built again, and then built again. And so Agile Development is a wonderful way to keep something rolling, keep something being developed without sitting in a room for 2 years, and this is where it came from. People would sit in a room for 2 years and develop out a program or an application and debut it, and it was supposed to be perfect. And people would say, but that's not what I wanted. Well, over those 2 years, they didn't have a chance to check that. So if you write 2 lines of code and check and see, is that what you need? Is that what you're talking about? Then it goes, in the end, so much smoother. So that's a terrible explanation of Agile, but that's the idea. What's the benefit of recognizing low-impact, low-risk elements? Just when people talk about them, some people may think, this is really important, but then as you're putting everything up on your whiteboard, you realize that in context, some things are really low risk. So yes, a hurricane might come. Thank you, Debbie Downer. I'll put it over here. That's just kind of that idea. You can just cut and throw them out the window. Anything else? Oh, Doug, that's a really good point. Back in the process chart, let me try and go to it without clicking back. Here we go. Down here, where it says communications management process, that's what Doug's talking about. Everything that you develop is part of the project. It's not part of what I've highlighted here, but can help with your communications. And so as you go along with the project, you're doing a commercial for the project, and everything feeds into itself. It's really important. Forms being available. Forms are available on the Project Management Institute website. There's a Project Management Institute Atlanta website, and then also on Rita Mulcahy's sites. If you buy any of her books, you get them all forms for free. But also just Google them. There's nothing official about them. You just need somewhere to start. That had problems enforcing the triangle? Yeah, definitely. And that's why the structure of project management helps. It helps a lot. Because you can say, I didn't make this up. I mean, we have a budget, we have a timeline, and we have scope. Now you want me to add this much scope. So is there any more money? Is there any more time? If you're telling me no, then there are consequences. I didn't make the consequences up. I'm not adhering to something that I'm personally invested in. I'm just pointing out that there are consequences. And so it does help objectify the whole situation and take me out of it. But yes, I've had horrible trouble enforcing the triangle, and sometimes I've just been told, just do it. So that's when you go back to your desk and cry a little and, get it done. Project management software. Of course, this Microsoft project is kind of like using a sledgehammer for a penny nail a lot of times. It's crazy complicated. I don't know. I'd be interested to know if anyone knows of any open source project management software. Every time I look, which is now about every 6 months, I don't see anything that really works. Forms tend to work really well. I use Visio or what's the Mac equivalent of Visio? To map out timelines, diagrams, wireframes, etc. And I also just will use Excel to do Gantt charts and timelines. So, you know, it's really whatever the organization has available. And again, a lot of the forms are very basic and straightforward, and everybody can understand them. But I'd be interested if anybody found any sort of alternative to Microsoft Project. Dot Project. Yeah, for software development. Yeah, that's what I found. Cliff, I agree with you completely. For regular project management, I use Word and Excel. Yeah. Google Docs, the only hesitation I have with Google Docs, because I'm in library, is privacy. I don't want anybody else to own my docs, but you know. Tamika, I'd be interested to know if any templates that anyone has. I have just a boatload of templates that I'd be willing to send out to anyone who needs it. So just shoot me an email. I can send you a template of a document of almost all the processes that you see in the slides. Yep, there's my site. Feel free to shoot me an email. I'll send you anything I've got. It may help, it may not. Looks like we're wrapping up. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it, and I hope it was helpful.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Emily. That was very informative, and I feel like I've got a little bit more spinal column now to take on project management. I'm going to be less of a Tim Gunn and more of an Emily Almond. So thank you all so much for your attendance today. We have a couple of little slides we'd like to show here. We just want to remind everyone that the Carterette series webinars were renamed recently in honor of one of our founding members, Pat Carterette, who passed away in January of 2011. And she was an incredible librarian and just a great human being, and we miss her very much. And we want to thank you for your attendance today. Let me advance the slide here. Here we go. We hope you enjoyed the session as much as we did. And on the closing slides, you'll see the URLs for the assessment for today's webinars and for the certificate request for the webinar that you just attended. And we hope you'll take the time to complete the assessment, as your feedback is very important to us. The next webinar is going to be starting at about 11:15, so you can just stay in the room if you want to, and just mark yourself as away and take a little break. If you have an idea for a topic or presenter for future webinars, please let us know, and you can see all of our email addresses at the bottom of the slide. So we're going to take a little break right now, and we'll return to this room at 11:15 a.m. for Unconference Planning presented by Andrew Shuping.